You're tuned into The Collective Voice, thought-provoking interviews co-hosted by young adults, fostering deep faith through courageous questions. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Collective Voice. I'm Cece and I'm with Phil, who we co-host this podcast for through the 787 Collective. And we're glad to be back after a little bit of a summer break. It's back to school, so we're back to podcasting.
School, back to podcasting. A little bit of a break, and I missed it. I missed being in conversation with young adults, so I'm excited about this opportunity. Today we have Emma Rooker joining us. This is kind of just coincidental. So I was in Santa Barbara this summer, as one does, because why not go to Santa Barbara in the summer? It's nice. Beautiful and lovely. I was doing a site visit, which is part of what we get to do through the Young Adult Initiative with the Lilly Endowment, visiting Westmont College and our colleagues at Westmont. And Emma happened to be there for a training they were hosting. Not a training. It's a year-long cohort, right, that you're a part of.
It was our opening retreat.
Yeah, that Westmont was hosting for ministers, right? For not just young adults, but just ministers in general. And it happens to be both those, a young adult and in ministry. And so got to go and have a glass of wine one night with Emma and our friend Sarah, and then spend some time together over the next couple of days as they were doing this retreat. And it was just delightful and lovely. And it was fun to hear your story. And so I thought, hey, Emma, you should really join our podcast. And so thank you for accepting the invitation. Would you like to just share a bit about yourself with our audience?
Yeah, I'm Emma. Trying to figure out how to introduce myself because I am currently in a job search and just discerning a lot. But I most recently was living in Seattle. I was up there for 6 years. Part of that was school. And then I was doing youth ministry and community engagement in the Central District neighborhood of Seattle, which is neighborhoods are important. Were really important to that part of my work. And so I was up there for 6 years. And did a bunch of fun stuff that maybe we'll get to talk about. And recently made the decision to relocate, leave that job, handed it off to a good friend of mine and actually a former volunteer. That youth ministry is now under his care, and relocated to Portland, Oregon. So just 3 hours south. I'm originally from Oregon, not from Portland, but relocated to just be closer to some friends of mine as I discern what's next. Vocationally, youth ministry, youth pastoring. There was as with any other ministry role, there was also 400 other things I did. But the youth thing was obviously
other duties as assigned. Yeah.
My favorite. Yeah. Several hats. And I, on the side, I've been a copywriter for a long time and an editor. I started doing that in college to ensure that I had food on my table. Have done that ever since. I do a little bit of writing, freelance work now, and I'm a creative nonfiction writer on the side. So that's a little bit about my creative life outside of ministry. But right now I'm in Portland. I'm applying to jobs, writing so many cover letters. It's a kind of a humiliation process. A humiliation ritual, it feels like. But I'm really enjoying being back in Portland and close to my best friends live here. And that's me. I feel like there's probably more, but that's the gist of it.
Well, thanks, Emma, for explaining. I hope I'm not too laggy. I know what it's like to be in discernment. I was a pastor of a small congregation from around this time starting 3 years ago until Christmas Eve of last year, and began feeling last summer, starting to feel an urge for something else, not quite knowing what that was, and then watching that manifest. So can you tell us a little bit about what discernment looks like for you? Do you have any practices that are a part of your repertoire? I know for me, I'm such an external processor that when I'm in discernment, my trusted homies are on the phone with me all the time, and I feel so bad for them. I'm I don't care about you. I don't care about what's going on in your life. I forget to ask the important questions. It's just, hey, I'm holding this, and can you pray with me and talk with me? So what are some of those for you?
Yeah, I think it's changed over the months. I made the decision to leave Seattle and go to Portland almost 4 or 5 months in advance, which is kind of rare, but this the way that it worked out was the way that it worked out. And I think in those early days, I walk a lot. I'm a big walker. I was really close with my great grandma when I was growing up, and still am. She actually lives in Santa Barbara, where I met Phil. But she would always go on walks, and I was like, why is my grandma always walking? And now I understand why, because yeah, so many things, like there's like the meme that's like the source, like, I don't know, it was revealed to me on a walk. That I feel that so deeply. So I think I walk a lot. I think that walking is a huge part of my prayer life. And then I journal, which is like a very pat answer, but is very true. It's one of the first things I do in the mornings. I call it like running the tap. Like I just have to get all of my thoughts out, whether you want to call that morning pages or there's lots of different things you can call that. But I think journaling a lot, walking a lot. Yes, I am also a verbal processor. So talk a lot. I have a really good therapist who I have processed so much of my discernment around when I was moving and what was next in my career, and continue to process. So yeah, those are probably the big three: walking, really good therapy, and writing. And I think something that I've been convicted of recently is like I have to continue to live my life while I'm discerning my life. Like I have to continue to go out. I've been in this strange season. I'm very extroverted. I've never been a homebody in my entire life. And I think when I've moved to Portland, I have a smaller amount of friends, and I haven't felt a ton of like desire to go and make a million friends, which I think is me just getting older a little bit and protecting my time and my peace. But also I am just in a weird season of like feeling a little bit more isolated. And so I think I've recently been more just convicted of like, okay, I have to like go out and like continue to live my life. I can't just like sit in my room and sit and write all day. There's other things around me that are going to help me discern, which can be hard and scary. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. I just want to sit and discern. But I think for me, discernment has always involved community and other people and other things around me. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. We feel like we have conversations quite regularly with young adults finding themselves in a new city. So I hear you in the easy aspect of just being able to be a recluse sometimes. And I too am an extrovert. And so the older I'm getting, and my older is older than some of you people's older, but I'm also learning to value more independence and just like time. And yeah, I would love to know, like, how are you finding that community? Like you said, you have some friends, which is great that you knew from previously, but what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to put yourself out there, get out there, and to find new folks and engage in a broader community and find a sense of belonging in this place that you're now calling home in Portland?
Yeah, I feel like I have a unique situation. Moved to Portland, and I'm originally from Bend, Oregon, which is in Central Oregon. It's like 2.5, 3 hours away. And in the time that I was in Seattle, a lot of my friends, a mentor of mine, and then my two best friends fell in love and got married. Highly recommend. Worked out great for me. A lot of them moved from Bend to Portland and relocated. And I think by proxy, a lot of their friends I call them like my friend-in-laws, like my friends' friends. Like they have become my friends in a lot of ways. So I feel like I came to Portland and there was already a lot of community, like people that I knew loosely, but people that I'm getting to know better or reestablishing relationship with. So that's been amazing and nice. And I feel like the Lord has just really surprised me. I think knowing I haven't had a ton of energy processing what my ministry job was, processing a lot of just things in my personal life, I feel like the Lord has just like brought back people into my life. My first weekend here, I was at a concert at a McMenamins. If you're from the Pacific Northwest, you'll know what McMenamins is, but it's basically, I don't want to misquote what this is, but basically it's a restaurant chain that takes historic places and renovates them. So you can go to like 1 million of them, maybe not 1 million, that's an exaggeration, but there's like McMenamin heads, like they'll go. And I think if you go to like every single one, you get like free beer for life or something. Anyways, highly recommend. The one in Bend is an old nunnery, which I always thought was really cool because when I was 6, I was like, maybe I should be a nun. Like that was really intriguing to me from a very young age. Anyways, I was at a McMenamins and walked in with some friends first weekend in Portland. And I made eye contact with this girl across the room, but I didn't really think anything of it. And then she walked up to me, and it was a girl that I have not seen since the 4th grade, in a completely different state, one I've not mentioned living in at all yet in our conversation. So we've reconnected. She runs a neighborhood coffee shop connected to her church. There's another girl from a different period of my life that I just found out lives like walking distance from me. So there's just been some like fun moments of like, oh, I've never really thought of picking up this connection again, or it just wasn't, you meet a million people in your lifetime. So that's been a blessing. I don't say that lightly, but like really like, oh, there's these people that are kind of already built in. And then during my time in Seattle, I worked in conjunction. My position was co-funded and co-managed by both a church and a nonprofit. And the nonprofit is Urban Impact in Seattle. It was founded upon CCDA principles, if you're familiar with that world. But basically, in short, the whole idea is like we want to be attentive to our place. And rather than showing up in a community and saying, what can we do to bring God to these people? We're going to ask, what is God already doing in this place? And let's be curious about what's already happening. And so I think I always say, or not always, in the past 6 months that I've moved away, I say that living in Seattle and being intentional and living in a place it's ruined me for neighborhood work and just really wanting to know my neighbors and to know what's going on. And so I think even just if I'm on one of my many walks, sometimes per day, in between lots of other discernment and things, if it's just getting to know the man who lives in his van across the street from me, or the guy who jumped my car that works at the Jiffy Lube a few months ago. So I think the slow work of ministry and just the slow work of relationships. Obviously, relationships often move at the speed of trust. And so I think trusting those things and trusting that they are beautiful and do work and have proven to work in other areas of my life. Not that I'm working towards something and there's a goal there, but just the slow work of community.
Do you feel like is it weird to reconnect with people from back then? Like, do you ever resort back to a previous version of yourself?
It is weird. Actually, the girl that I reconnected with, it's so funny. I think she probably came to my birthday parties when I was younger, but to me, she was like this very, like I wasn't cool enough to be her friend. And like, we had drinks when I moved back, and it was like we had this very funny conversation about the space that we grew up in theologically. That's like probably very different from where we would find ourselves now. And I won't like say too much to like go into that, but it is weird. It's also been, I think for me, I grew up in a really chaotic family system, and there was a lot of just like deep brokenness and trauma that happened when I was a kid. And so actually reconnecting with certain people from other areas of my life has been a reminder of like, there are things I don't have to heal from. Like, there are actually really beautiful things in my story that God was orchestrating, and Jesus, you were there and you were working through people. So I don't think hopefully I'm not regressing, maybe in some ways. That's why I'm in therapy. But I think there's also been some moments of like, this is like a part of my story, and it was really beautiful. And I get so focused on like what I have to work through and what I have to heal from. But there's things that I don't have to. Yeah.
That really resonates with me. I had a very turbulent end of my high school journey, and I kind of had a very turbulent childhood and turbulent high school period. And this past November, so November 25, was our 10-year high school reunion, a little late because we graduated in 2015. And I wasn't going to go because, like I said, lots of change, and I really only had one friend from high school, like in my class left. But besides a couple of kids from my youth group who were also at my high school. And he's like, you gotta come. That's just no holds barred. Like, you're coming, actually. Like, I'm picking you up. We're doing it. And I went, and I'm really glad I did, because it reminded me, like, seeing kids that I was on summer league swim team with, and people that I just like mess around in class with in the 9th grade, and, drifted apart. And, the random people that were like, oh, hey, Cece, how are you? It reminded me of a fuller picture of myself, right? And beyond the turbulence, like, it's easier to remember those ups and downs rather than like that smooth sailing in the airplane. So I resonate a lot with that. And I'm also resonating with some of what you're saying around neighborhood and community and like physical location and space. I'm curious about that. You named at the beginning that in Seattle, neighborhoods are important, and like your work being rooted in the neighborhood, not just we're in this location, but we want to be connected to what they're already doing, being from Bend, but now living in Portland, and there's a sense of familiarity and home. So I just wonder if you can talk with us a little bit about like what this new season of discernment, how that's met you maybe in this physical place. And even like that woman that you connected with who like owns a neighborhood coffee shop, right? Like a neighborhood coffee shop is different than a Starbucks. 100%. So I feel like there's some connection there, right? With neighborhood, with community, with locale. Can you expand?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to decide which direction to go because there's like 4 different avenues that just appeared in front of me.
It's like a choose your own adventure. Just pick one and then you can always be in it.
Yeah, I think so. I'll go back to Seattle if that's okay. I worked at an organization called Urban Impact. It's been around for I think almost 40 years, doing work in different neighborhoods, mostly in the south end of Seattle, but has expanded a bit. And I work specifically on the neighborhood transformation team. There's a church that's placed in a neighborhood and is open to the neighborhood. And then there's the nonprofit and you're working together. And so I was in the Central District, and there was, I was tasked with building a youth ministry from the ground up. And I have a bachelor's in pastoral ministry, and I took a youth ministry class, and I had done an internship for the West Coast, like a mega church in Bend. And I arrived to the Central District of Seattle, and I'm like, oh, so none of this that I learned is relevant. Like quite literally, I don't know anything, which is hard for me because I've been a know-it-all since I was like 5. So I land in this neighborhood at this church, and the church has only been around for about 10 years, probably 12 at this point, but really small. So I'm tasked with pioneering youth ministry from the ground up. When I got there was like 5 kids that we had, and they were not always the same 5 kids that would show up week after week. And I had always gone to churches where there was a youth group because their grandparents had gone to the church, and their parents just like dropped them off. I had to go looking for, like literally, that sounds weird, but like looking for these kids of like, who are the neighborhood kids? Like who lives around here? And so I think that, and what also was helpful is we don't have a building. The church still does not own a building to this day. We rent out a high school cafeteria for church every Sunday. And during the week, it wasn't available to us. So honestly, up until the last point that I was in, the last year that I was in Seattle, we were constantly looking for space for our kids to meet. And there's like a million stories I could tell about, like we had a space that flooded. There was this so many different things. But I had never lived anywhere. I'd never gone to a church that didn't have a building and like a gym and like its own worship team. Is really new for me. And so I'm landed in Seattle. Had an amazing, and they're still there to this day and are still some really good friends of mine, like these incredible volunteers, which if you've ever been in ministry, you cannot do anything, especially youth ministry, without dedicated volunteers. There were so many times where we had like more volunteers show up than we did students. And I was like, all right, like here we are. But my point to say is like, I'd never been in a space where I just didn't have immediate like privilege and access to a gym or a space. So I'm suddenly walking around my neighborhood thinking, okay, what empty space is there? Like, where could we rent from? Who can we borrow space from? Whose house can we meet at? And so that makes you makes you really scrappy, which I think anyone in ministry has to be scrappy, whether you work at a a mega church or not. But suddenly I'm going on neighborhood walks and I'm like, oh, that building is empty. Or maybe this school has a space that we can rent. And I'm taking the scenic route to answer your question. But I think that those like not even months, years literally of looking for a space has just like made me keep my eyes peeled. And not only, oh, where can we move in and like take up space, but how can this be like a mutually beneficial situation? Like we rent your gym, like we ended up renting out, and they're still there today, like a gym from a local Catholic school and church. How can we volunteer at your school? How can we show up when there's a tragedy in the community and support your students at one of your masses or a vigil? How can we continue to give back? So I think that has been huge, and I've carried that with me into this season in Portland, where I'm like, okay, I'm here, I'm able-bodied, I know my way around a few different things, community engagement and youth ministry wise. And I don't ever want to live any way, like I want to live in that manner for the rest of my life, of just being attentive to space and place and what God is doing. And not only how can I fit myself in here and squeeze in, but like how can I also, serve and bring my giftings and also create space at the same time. Hopefully that, I think that was like four. I went down all four roads at once, so I chose all the adventures.
You wove them lovely in a lovely way. It makes me think of there was that question, right? That I forget what book it was in, but like if your church disappeared from your community, would the community notice?
Yeah.
And that haunted me for a long time because I too served at a mega church for a while, and I thought, yeah, they'd notice because on Sunday mornings there wouldn't be as many headaches from like all the traffic around this church in this neighborhood, like. And that's not the only reason, right? Like there's a lot of really good things that they would for sure notice about it being absent. But it does bring up this really interesting question of the value of church and beyond a building, like as we start to think of the future of church, where, a lot of these big denominations have all these buildings, but not a lot of people,
Yeah.
And so what does a church that is nomadic look like? And what is an expression of church that isn't tied to a specific building? And like, in some ways, how did that transform your understanding of faith as you experienced a nomadic church?
Yeah, I think, you always grow up, if you grew up in a faith background or in a context, you always hear like, the church is not the building, it's the people. And you're like, okay, yeah, but like literally that is, how it felt. And when I think about, when I don't think I actually, didn't land for me until I worked at Urban Impact, which taught me so much about that. And the boss that I had there, who's amazing. And, even just the church, I think it made it real for me, and also, breaks down these ideas of like there's only one expression of the church. And as a young adult, I'm like geriatric Gen Z. I'm 28, but I am watching so many of my friends and just peers leave the church and decide that they're not rocking with it anymore. And in a lot of ways, I understand, and I'm still in deep relationship with many of my friends who have landed there. But for me, I still believe in the church. I do believe that we gotta stay and keep the lights on. And I think there is something that is important for me about ordering my life to something that's not always convenient, and showing up in a space each week to sing with people and commune with people in a way that often transcends our political differences, our differences in general, our, socioeconomic differences, whatever it is. But I also think, keeping the lights on doesn't just mean the lights that turn on a Sunday morning. I think our church, we, rented like a random house that they still rent as our office space. During the week, there's a community dinner that's being run in conjunction with a completely different church in the neighborhood that's like a 10-minute walk away from where we gather. The youth group is at the local Catholic middle school. There's so many different places in that neighborhood specifically that I think we stretch across. And so it does it doesn't do away with your vision of what church looks like. It just expands it. And yeah, church, dinner church is happening on, this street at this time when people are serving meals, and there's quite literally anyone that could be walking by from any different walk of life that's sharing dinner together and hearing from the Gospels. And so I think, yeah, I'm probably still discovering and unearthing in myself what that means, but it's definitely changed. And now I'm attending a church that a lot of my friends work at, and it is a very different church from where I was working in Seattle. It's a very big church. The lights are off. The music is a lot louder. And I think I'm learning to not have to feel like I have to reconcile all these spaces that I've inhabited the past few years together. And I found myself, I was at a summer camp with a bunch of middle schoolers a few weeks ago, volunteering, and in a Pentecostal space, which is part of my background, and a part of my background that I deeply value. And when I was in Seattle, I was working in a non-denominational church, and then I would go to the Episcopal church for Eucharist in the mornings before I would go to work. So there's all these different spaces that I've been in that I'm really grateful for. And I found myself at that camp trying to fit them all together and make them fit together. And then I just felt like the Holy Spirit was you don't have to. I'm in all of them, but resisting the urge to reconcile, really force them to fit together. And I think I'm in a season where I'm really, really trying. I told my best friend, we were at a Daniel Caesar concert last night, and I told her on the way home, or when we were driving there, I feel like I'm just really trying really hard to make this season of my life make sense. And it doesn't right now in all of the ways. But letting go of control is a big thing that I'm always learning. I think all of us are always learning.
And it's one of those things that's way easier said than done, right? It's easy to say let go and let God. To really actually do that is scary, and
fits well on a bumper sticker, but not reality.
Yeah. So I wonder, it seems like you have a mixed experience. You have a lot in your background and your personal history and your upbringing, the churches that you've worked with, the churches that you attended right now. And this might not be a fair question, so feel free to say let's not go there, because it's hard sometimes to do this. But in this period of discernment, what are your dreams for yourself? And perhaps I don't know if there's your next thing is exploring more work with ministry. I don't know if it's really going into writing. I mean, I don't know you well enough to have a sense of that, but at 3:06 Central Time, 1:06 Pacific, on August 19th, it's not cut in stone, right? But right now, as you begin to articulate in this discerning period, what are you dreaming of? What's God dreaming of alongside you?
Yeah. No, I don't mind the question. It will probably be helpful for me to even process that out loud. But I think I feel called to ministry. What that looks like specifically, I don't know. But I know I do want to be a pastor one day. I think I'm in a massive trying to figure out what denomination and tradition I would like to end up in, which is a mystery to me, because I just like a lot of them, and I wish I could do all of them, but I also don't think that probably would be stressful for me, and also just doesn't make sense career-wise. So I think long-term ministry is what I feel called to, and what I've felt called to vocationally since I was probably around 17 years old. But I have, in this space of having more free time, I've always known that I wanted to be a writer. Before I felt called to ministry, I've just always known that words have been welling up in me, and sometimes I'm maybe they'll stop, but they never have. And so that's something I'm really focusing on right now, especially in all of the free time that I have of what does that look like? I have a lot of feelings around, feelings and also ideas about what it might mean to create just more equity and accessibility for people who are creative. Working in a church, no matter how healthy the church is and no matter how boundaried you are, can, I think, suck your creative life away because you are having to problem solve and be creative in a number of ways. And there's a period of my life in Seattle where I wasn't writing as much because I was trying to find a place for kids to meet because our previous place had flooded or, whatever it was. And so I'm thinking a lot these days about, like there are so many people whose creative voices we don't get to hear from because we're busy paying our bills or raising our kids or doing our ministry jobs. And so I'm dreaming a lot actually with one of my good friends back in Seattle who works for Urban Impact. He's a hip hop artist and we have very different expressions of our art, but we were always having conversations about, what does it look like to support people? Right now we say young adults, but him and I will not always be young adults. To support people who have all these creative dreams, but are also feel called to different work. Like, what does that look like? So I have a lot of dreams around that, but what that could look like. And just for my own life, what does my own creative life look like? I have a few personal projects I'm working on currently that hopefully will turn into something. It's always kind of like I'm just following the road down and seeing what emerges. And I think for me, a lot of moving to Portland was just some healing and being close to people that are important to me and people that are like family to me, or I'm trying to understand what the concept of family looks like, which is just a huge part of my own story. So I'm dreaming a lot about creativity. I'm dreaming, I wouldn't say short term, but long term about what ministry looks like for me vocationally. And I think just constantly, how do I be a good friend and a good neighbor? And how do I live? How do I live in the world that I live in?
Let us know when you figure it out. We'll have you back. You can let us know what it looks like to be a good neighbor and live in the world that we're living in right now. Because
we'll do.
We all, You you mentioned creativity a couple times, and you said you are creative nonfiction writer. Is that what you said, right?
Yes.
Will you explain what that means specifically and what that genre really looks like for you?
I write a lot of poetry and a lot of essays. Some publicly. I have a Substack that I'm begrudgingly trying to take more seriously these days. And then, I just have a lot of personal projects. I'm working on a long-term, long-form project right now that has been going since I was like 24 officially, slowly trudging my way through that. But essays, a lot of it is very diaristic, meaning just things about my own life. And just people, there's a lot of, I think the natural world shows up a lot I grew up in an agricultural space on a little farm in Oregon. And so those themes show up a lot in my writing. There's a lot of things on grief, which everybody's talking about, I feel like these days, because we're all really sad with the state of the world. So those things show up. But I think creative nonfiction is a broad way of saying a lot of random mediums, but I'm writing about my own life and experiences. So does that answer your question?
Well, totally. But when you say grief, are you writing more typically about like personal grief, or is it collective grief, or a little bit of both?
Yes, I would say both. I think grief has always been present in my life in a visceral way, as it has for many of us, or all of us. In maybe it's a spectrum. But my dad passed away when I was in high school, and I probably lost him before I lost him in that way. And so, which is how I've always described it. But I talk a lot about the grief of that and the grief of, being a 20-something, which I feel like is there as well. I think grief in the sense of what does it mean? I think a lot about what it means to grieve when you're young. Because typically you don't lose a parent when you're 17. You hope to lose them many, many decades later. So that's a part of it. I think grieving like the loss of like maybe family systems or even church systems or faith communities are things I'm always constantly interested in. And also, what does it mean to grieve in the direction of God and with God, which is not something I'm an expert on, but I would like to be one day, hopefully. Phil, I can't hear
Phil,
you.
you're muted. Embarrassing.
That was so embarrassing.
Embarrassing. He's
I
gonna
said
cut
something
that.
really profound too. Like it was really important.
I'm sure.
We don't know about that.
No, actually, I was just gonna say that I feel like grief isn't always something the church does well, though. So I'm just curious if you have found the church to be a space that embraces grief, or like I'm thinking back to, I don't remember, this was a while ago, but like how in the CCLI or whatever, there was so few songs that actually addressed anything around grief or lamentation or anything of like that nature, within the song categories, so like have you found expressions or opportunities to like enter into grief in community? Like you talked about the value of community earlier, right? Like is that something you found in the church?
Yes, which I don't think is always what people would say, and I think it's true. I think yes, sometimes churches don't do grief well, but now I feels like for the past 5 years, we've just been talking about how churches don't do grief well. Like we haven't actually started doing it well. That was my like knee-jerk reaction.
Fair enough.
To that. But honestly, I think you lose the privilege and ability to not do it when you're in certain communities and spaces. I think I was given the opportunity to be in a church where we're in the Central District of Seattle. People are facing a lot of hard things. That neighborhood specifically is very historic. It was redlined back in the day. It's become very gentrified. So there's a lot of different things that are layered and hard. And there was multiple gun violence incidents when I was there. And I think because of the proximity to tragedy, the kind of like desire or need or temptation to sidestep grief is just it's not something that we're afforded. And which is really beautiful in a lot of ways. And so I feel like the church that I was at and the people that I was ministering with and our staff team and our volunteers, it was just there. The grief was in the community all of the time because of circumstances and because of evil, because of brokenness, because of systems of power, because of abuse of power. And so I think, I didn't feel in my time in Seattle specifically, that you can't look away in a lot of ways, which is really beautiful. I'm also noticing a trend in I won't say my generation because that's really broad, but like a lot of my peers, including myself, that grew up in or came up in charismatic Pentecostal spaces, which can sometimes go into triumphalism and maybe avoidance of grief. I'm seeing a lot of us gravitate towards liturgical spaces and high church spaces. There's a little church in Seattle that I was an Episcopal church, and I started going there kind of as a way of just keeping myself grounded. When I would go to church, I would like be with middle school boys and like asking them not to set things on fire or lock themselves, there's just a lot of things. So I would go
also holy work. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. Go to Eucharist in the morning and that was like my rhythm. And then I would walk through on the water by Madison Park in Seattle. And then I would go to my church that I worked at and would ask middle school boys to not light things on fire, and to stop wrestling each other in the back pew. And then we would go play kickball. And then I would be done with church for the day. And then I would go back to the Episcopal church for evensong, at 5:30 p.m. And that space, it's a lot slower. There was a lot, I think it maintained my reverence in a lot of ways because I was so distracted at the other spaces that I was in. But I think those spaces oftentimes hold space for grief in ways that certain other spaces don't. That was Wow, that was such a profound sentence. Certain other spaces don't. Please don't quote me. Those are the best sentence I've said all day.
That'll go on social media. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, just under the thumbnail. So yeah, but I would say that I think the churches that I have been a part of and the spaces that I've occupied, I think they do a good job of grief, but I think it is very contextual because you can't look away when you've lost a member of your community and it was a 16-year-old boy or some other horrific tragedy. Not to monopolize on that and to turn that into content, but I just think that's true.
Especially when you're rooted in your neighborhood. Like I could see there be churches that can look away or neighbors who can look away because they're not rooted in their community, because they go there to worship and then they go home. And I am a commuter to the churches that I've attended, and except for the one I went to when I was growing up, because we lived in the apartment complex across the street. But most people there were commuters. So I think that's also like the contextual distinction and an important one and a challenge to the churches that aren't rooted in their neighborhood to know what's going on beyond. So I'm curious, hearing like the Pentecostal charismatic upbringing, non-denominational job, and even like a church that you're attending now, and then like seeking out a little Episcopal church.
Yeah.
I am Lutheran, like we are Protestant, like just such a liturgical tradition. Charismatic for us is like add a guitar and drums into the band and play hymns like a little bit faster,
Yeah.
with a tempo. So, and a big part of me for connection with faith is music. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering for you, knowing that the worship styles, one, are very different, but you're talking about like I went to Eucharist and then I went to my church and was worship, and then we played kickball, which such a youth experience, right? Like I remember being that futzy kid in the back row, like we all got to do it. And then you went to evening song, and I'm like, okay, dang, you're just all throughout the traditions. And that's great. Like I think that's great as a wanderer and a little bit of myself. Like it's amazing. Does your soul find a home in a particular kind of worshiping tradition or type of music, or is it truly like you have this diversity of experience and longing and upbringing that like you really like, I want to take the sacrament and then I want to go in a charismatic service and then I also want to do evening song, and your heart is just open to it all? I'm so curious.
Yeah, I'm also curious. I think this is where the like trying to reconcile and put all of these pieces together is like a bit of I'm not even gonna say like a mystery to me. Like it's like a frustration for me a little bit of like, okay, but where do I belong? I grew up in a fundamentalist church, which I won't spend that much time talking about, but very different. I always joke, but like it's not a joke, that I grew up in like the church from Footloose, like quite literally had to wear a dress every Sunday. And anyway, so came up kind of, just like more conservative fundamentalist spaces. And then when I was in high school, I have a driver's license and I just started going to a different church, opposite my family. I don't actually know what they thought of that, but like, I was just like, I'm going here, see you later. And that was my first moment of like, oh, women can be pastors. That was a huge part of my story, as is for many women. And I didn't know at the time, but it was a Foursquare church, which is kind of like the Assemblies of God's like cooler cousin, I feel like. I went to Assemblies of God University. So I'm like thinking of, choosing the best. Let me tell you, the best part about being in all these different spaces is you can like jokes that aren't funny, like are way old and like old news in the Assemblies of God. Like I can make that joke in a liturgical space and everyone thinks I'm hilarious. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like this joke has been said, like has been old and like so yesterday for years. But I think, so I came in a fundamentalist space, started going to a Foursquare church, and I'll be honest, like there is like a lot of my own inner life and the theological framework. Like I'm a little bit of a holy roller, and I like the drama of it, but I also like the drama of liturgical spaces too. And so I think and I'm back attending in more of a Pentecostal charismatic space. And so I think that is maybe and I kind of just I put myself, like, I was like, I'm going to raise myself in this, in this tradition, very different from what I came up in. And I think, yeah, there's definitely, I think a lot of churches in Seattle are still recovering from Mars Hill. And also recovering from like Mars Hill sounding worship, even if that's not what they're like going for, or they're like not even, so there's a lot of interesting spaces, but I think it is a little bit of like a tension point of what am I open to, but I do know in the chaos of living in like inner city, Seattle is a small city as cities go, but inner city Seattle, the Episcopal Church like really brought me a lot of peace and rhythm and just like non-anxious spaces. And I found that with some of my students, because I would sometimes bring some of my students, like little evangelical babies, to like a Eucharist service, and I have like great stories from that, and they like have no idea what's going on. But I would notice like them like really enjoying the choir and the music. And as much as I didn't love the fundamentalist church, and like I was always like, I just thought God was like always angry at me growing up in that church, I like those hymns that we sang come back to me in my adult life. They're so rich with theology versus the, sort of like theologically thin, watered down stuff we're singing these days from the CCM industry. But so I think I'm processing where I belong and what keeps me open. But I do feel a little bit of like I have a Renaissance take on all of it, where I'm like, okay, like I think I do like to experience all of these, which is why it feels I'm discerning which tradition I would like to end up in.
And I love that for you, because I do, like, I grew up Lutheran, ELCA Lutheran, so it's the tradition that women can be ordained in. I feel very fortunate that like that was never a fight for me. I did not have I really kind of came around to my call to ministry through my campus pastor, who was a woman. So it's like super important to have female representation in leadership, because like even if you do to a little bit, or like women council presidents and women associate pastor, until you see it, you can't really fully know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in this season of my life, where I'm not in a parish on a Sunday, I can do what I want. And I still gravitate to like liturgical spaces, Lutheran spaces. Like I'll supply preach for friends and congregations, but getting to go to the church that we attend, to a church here in Austin that does like very creative liturgical worship. Like we just did a feast day for Mary, Mother of God. And like feast days aren't really a thing in the Lutheran tradition. And then I go to like a little country church for the work that we do with our rural and small town grant. Like it makes me, when you get to see so much more, two, you get to like see what's going on in your own spirit. And I think three, like this is probably has and will like make you a better minister and pastor, because you've had this broad range of experiences. And I'll just say, like, I love the questions. I love the wondering. I love the searching. I wish I could give you answers, and I can't, because like that's your journey. But the church is so very clearly like being deconstructed as what does it mean to be church right now. And there are churches that are like, yeah, we're going to be Methodist, or we're going to be Presbyterian or Lutheran, but we're going to be a dinner church. And we're going to do things differently. Like that's the future. So what a time to be discerning and know like this is in my path and I don't know what it looks like. I think that's great, because honestly, the church doesn't know what it looks like. And when they answer, oh, but we're going to keep doing all this, like that's just, it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love it. And I hope it's hard to not feel like you know where you belong, but it also sounds like you found spaces of belonging all around. And is that not what God and Jesus do, right? Did Jesus not find spaces of belonging all across the board with all kinds of people?
Okay, so you also mentioned the natural world, right? Like walking and being out in nature. And as we kind of wrap this, and just what a lovely conversation, I think it's just very rich on this idea of so many things living in us all at once, And what it made me think of too was you coming like full circle kind of back to this Pentecostal space. But like you're in nowhere in the same way, like those relationships I was asking about, like, does it feel like a regression? Like you're going back to old versions of you, like you're circling back. But what I love about it makes me think of like spiral dynamics, right? It's not actually it's not a circle, it's a spiral, right? Like, because you are not in no way the same person that you were when you were in those spaces however many years ago. So, it's this whole concept of transcend and include, which I think is just really powerful, because you get to bring the fullness of yourself to it in a way that you didn't previously. So I'll just say, I would love to know where in the natural world you have been inspired or found awe or wonder recently.
Yeah, great question. Honestly, in the process of wildfires, there has obviously been a lot of devastation, even recently, in Spokane and in parts of Oregon, which there's a poem that I wrote about this, I think it was like 2 years ago, about like how the Pacific Northwest kind of lights up on fire, every August. And I think I just titled it like 2 months of summer, 1 month of smoke, which is like what I always feel like we have in the Pacific Northwest. And as a kid, I lived for the first 15 years of my life in northern Arizona, and we were evacuated multiple times for wildfires. Like there was moments where the wildfire like burned up to our fence, and there was one fire in particular that burned for I think like 2 weeks at like 0% containment. And as a result, we have monsoon season in northern Arizona. So as a result, we had rain like a month after that caused devastating flash floods, just like wrecked the ecosystem. And this is actually added to one of the personal writing projects that I'm working on. But yeah, I've just become very fascinated with the effects of wildfires, the benefits of wildfires, and also the detriments of them, and burn scars that's created, and all of these different things, and how it affects the soil. And again, I'm from an agricultural background, so I feel like I've been doing a ton of research actually on those fires that actually like grew up, I was affected by. And also how communities pull together in the face of those things. And so that sounds really like, I'm sure you were like expecting like a little delicate flower, but yeah, wildfires and
a hummingbird,
devastation that they cause, and also the redeeming effects of them. I'm like, hopefully, no one looks at my because I probably would look like an arsonist right now if you were to look at my like Google search history, because I'm doing so much research and like have these things printed out.
FBI's got you on a list somewhere. Like, it's fine. Yeah. We're all on that based on some Google searches. Yeah. There's a Lutheran retreat center up in the North Cascade Mountains of Washington State called Holden Village. It's currently closed right now because of the atmospheric flood, but please Google it, because like I think you'd love that place. It's for
will do
wilderness and creativity and wonder. But last year I went with my church, and their theme was like 10 years after this devastating fire had come through the village and almost like destroyed the village, and then led to this remediation project. And so their like image focus was on fireweed, which is like often the first thing that grows after, and it's this like pretty beautiful purple flower. Right. And so like there is beauty after, and still there's devastation. So thank you, Emma, for your time, your conversation, your dreams, discernment, and wondering. We're so glad that you shared with us and with those who are listening. I'm sure others are in discernment. What's the name of your Substack, in case anyone wants to follow and read along?
I think it's just The Morning Shift is the name.
The Morning Shift.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will link it in the show notes.
Show notes.
So
yeah, thank you.
We go all the way back to like a month ago,
like a whole month and a half ago or something like that. Yeah.
Sarah Garland for connecting us. Yeah.
That's right. Shout out Sarah Garland. Yeah. Hey, blessings to you in all your discernment and whatever ministry endeavors are ahead of you, because we're excited for you anyway. 787 can support you in that work. Let us know, because we want to support young adults doing incredible things in ministries.
Thanks guys.
Blessings. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice, the premier podcast of the 787 Collective. For more information, visit us at 787collective.org or find us on social media. And if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and share a review. For when you do, you're tricking the algorithm for the common good.